Hi, I'm Agat from Made by Guti. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to crochet this triangle bunting pattern. I'm using a sport weight yarn, cotton yarn, and 3.5mm hook. You can use any yarn with a suitable hook for this pattern. The gauge is not really crucial. It will just result a different size. So let's start. We are starting the pattern with a magic ring. So create your ring and chain 2 to start. The chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch in this pattern. So I've chained 2 and I'm starting with 1 puff stitch, chain 2, a V puff stitch and another chain 2, all going into the ring, and we are repeating them 3 times. So to start with the puff stitch, this is a puff stitch with 3 repetitions. So I'm yarning over, inserting the hook into the ring, pulling up the yarn and repeating 2 more times until I have 7 loops on my hook. Then yarn over and pull the yarn through only 6 loops. Now yarn over again and pull the yarn through all 2 loops. So this is the first puff, then chain 2 and work a V puff. A V puff is just 1 puff, chain 1 and another puff. It is just an abbreviation, so I'm working another puff stitch, the same as I did here. Chaining 1 and working another puff stitch to create the V puff stitch. So as you can see, I have 1 puff stitch, then chain 2 and a V puff stitch, which is 1 puff, chain 1 and a second puff. And now I'm finishing the repetition with chain 2. So I'm going to repeat all these stitches 2 more times. So work 1 puff stitch, then chain 2 and the V puff stitch. So 1 puff, chain 1 and a second puff. And then finish with a chain 2. I'm closing my ring a little to make it easier to walk into it. And repeat 1 more time. Okay, so I finished the 3rd repetition. Then pull the ring tight to secure it. And slip stitch into the top of the first puff stitch to finish round 1. You can find the full stitch count and the written instructions on my blog Made by Guti. I will link it below. So to start off round 2, slip stitch into the next chain 2 space and then chain 2. Again, also here the chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch. And now we will start by working a V double crochet into the same chain 2 space. So work 1 double crochet, chain 1 and another double crochet into the same space. In this round we will be working only into the spaces, not into the puffs. And now we will skip the next puff and work a V double crochet into the next chain 1 space. and again into the next space work a V double crochet, now to create the corner we're working 5 chains, so chain 5 and then skip the next puff stitch and work a V double crochet into the next chain 2 spaces. And again work a V double crochet into the next 2 spaces. Then chain 5 and work a V double crochet into the next 3 spaces. So when you finish the round, chain 5 and slip stitch into the top of the first double crochet stitch that you made. Okay, so for round 3 we are also slip stitching into the next chain 1 space. We want to work into the spaces in this round and chain 2. Now we will work a V double crochet cluster stitch. So we will yarn over, insert the hook into the chain, into the space, and then pull up the yarn, yarn over and pull the yarn through only 2 of the loops. Then we will repeat one more time. And now we will yarn over and pull the yarn through all 3 loops. So this is the cluster stitch, the double crochet cluster stitch. And now we will chain 1 to make the V stitch, and we will repeat again. So yarn over, insert the hook into the same space and pull up the yarn, yarn over and pull the yarn through only 2 of the loops. Then repeat one more time into the same space, pull the yarn through only 2 loops, and then yarn over and pull the yarn through all 3 loops. So we have one cluster stitch, chain 1 and another cluster stitch. And now we will skip the next double crochet stitches, and again we will work only into the spaces. So work V double crochet cluster stitch into the next 2 chain 1 spaces. And now that you have reached the chain 5 space, we will work one V double crochet cluster stitch. We will chain 1 again, chain 5, sorry, again, and then another V double crochet cluster stitch. So make the V cluster stitch. Now chain 5 and another V cluster stitch, and now we will repeat in the next stitches the same way. So work the double crochet cluster stitch in each of the chain 1 spaces until you reach the chain 5 corner. And again repeat, work 1 V double crochet cluster stitch into the chain 5 space, then chain 5, and work another V double crochet cluster stitch into the same space, and continue working until the end of the round. When you finish the round, slip stitch to the top of the first cluster stitch that you made, moving on to round 4. Again, in this round we are starting by slip stitching into the next chain 1 space, and we will be working only into the spaces in this round, not into the stitches. So chain 2 and work a V double crochet into the same chain 1 space. Now skip the next stitches and work another V double crochet into the next chain 1 space and into the next all the next chain 1 spaces until you reach the chain 5 space, the corner. So now that we have reached the chain 5 corner, we will work a V puff stitch, then chain 2, another puff stitch, another chain 2, and another V puff stitch, all into the chain 5 space. So let's start. Work 1 puff, then chain 1 and another puff to create the first V puff stitch. Now we will chain 2 and work 1 puff stitch, then chain 2 again and work a V puff stitch. So start with 1 puff, chain 1 and another puff stitch. So as you can see, we have a V puff stitch chain 2, 1 puff stitch, chain 2, and V puff stitch. So now let's continue working 1 V double crochet into the next chain 1 spaces. Work in each of the chain 1 spaces until you reach the chain 5 corner, and in the corner work the same as you did here. After you worked your last corner, you will still have one last chain 1 space to work a V double crochet into it. And then slip stitch into the first double crochet that you made. Okay, so this is round 4. So let's start the last round of the triangle. So now chain 1, again it doesn't count as a stitch, and now we will work into both stitches and the spaces. So work 1 single crochet into the first double crochet and into the next 14 stitches, both chains and double crochet. So you will be working until you are reaching the chain 2 space. Also work into the puff stitches. Now that we have reached the chain 2 space, work 2 single crochet into the space and 1 single crochet into the next puff stitch. And now we will start to work the small scalloped edge. So we will be working into the chain 2 space. Make 1 half double crochet, 1 double crochet, and another half double crochet all into the chain 2 space. And now slip stitch into the next puff. And now make another 1 half double crochet, 1 double crochet, and 1 half double crochet into the next chain 1 space. Now skip the next puff stitch and slip stitch into the next double crochet. Now we will be repeating this 5 times. So you will be working into the next space, 1 half double crochet, 1 double crochet, and another half double crochet. Then skip the next stitch and slip stitch into the stitch that goes afterwards. So work your little scallop here, skip this one and slip stitch into this one, and repeat 5 times. Now I'm skipping the first double crochet and working a slip stitch into the next one and repeating. So I'm working the 5th scallop, and I will be skipping the next double crochet and slip stitch into the next puff stitch. Okay, now I will make another small scallop here into chain 1 space. And I will be skipping the next puff and then slip stitch into the chain 2 space. Now to work the bottom of the triangle, work 1 half double crochet, 3 double crochet and another 1 half double crochet all into this puff, the next puff. And then slip stitch into the next space, into the chain 2 space. Okay, so let's continue. Skip the next puff and work the small scallop into the next chain 1 space. So 1 half double crochet, 1 double crochet and another 1 half double crochet into the same chain 1 space. Then skip the next puff and work a slip stitch into the next double crochet stitch. And now we will repeating this again 5 times. So work the small scallop into the chain 1 space, skip the next stitch and slip stitch into the next stitch. When you finish repeating 5 times, you finished by slip stitching into the first puff stitch of this corner. Now make another small scallop again in the next chain 1 space. And slip stitch into the next puff stitch. Now work another small scallop and work 1 single crochet into the next puff stitch. Now work 2 single crochet into the next chain 2 space and into the next 6 stitches, both chains and stitches. Then slip stitch to the first single crochet, fasten off and weave it in the ends.